Um, let's see. I feel like I've shown you all the, just a really quick explanation of the migrations. So this is using a library called Rivet, which was also created by the creator of FN, Daniel Patterson. And Rivet lets you you kind of tell it how to connect to the database using this setup function. And you give it a mode, which is up, down, or status. And then you give it a list of migrations. And it just runs the migrations in order. And it'll only run them if they haven't been run before, obviously. So whenever everybody was getting set up and it said that it was looking for a Rivet auto importer, that's actually a language extension that you can install globally on your machine that'll automatically, at the time of compilation, when you're compiling your project, it will look in the same directory as this file and just add all the migrations in, I think, alphanumeric order. So like that's why it starts with this date, because you want to add the date to it. It's a little bit silly, but it's very simple and it works.
Is Rivet just a runner, or does it also do weird things like moving tables or renaming tables for you, so you don't have offline situations?
I'm not sure what you mean, so maybe no. But basically,
add a column to a table with billions of records. Right? You do it live, your data is going to be offline.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay, I know what you mean. No, we have to actually carefully manage that when we're running our migrations. Yeah.
Is that up to us or to Rivet?
It's up to you. Yeah. Unfortunately, Rivet is very simple. And if there might be a better option out there, like a lot of the solutions that I know of are from when I inherited the project or when Daniel wrote the project in 2013. So, but unfortunately, I think I heard last year that there still wasn't really another better option that can be used for any framework. Like Rivet is framework agnostic and doesn't care what your framework is. So anyway, the way that you do it is you can say, you make a migrate function, and you say SQL, and then you can give it an up and a down function that are just, they're not functions, they're just text. and that's SQL that's run and can do whatever you want it to do. So it's pretty basic. There's also, I just want you all to see my beautiful website that I made while you all were taking your break. So if you look at the docs, I think there's also a project what? This isn't it. That's a different thing that I don't think he ever finished. Yeah, so there's also a little DSL if you want to add your columns that way. So there's add column, drop column, where you give a column spec. But it's still just text and nothing fancy. So that's how you use migrations if you want to use Rivet. Okay, so the next, I don't know, I want to leave it up to y'all. What do you want to do? Do you want to add another, what feature do you want to add to this app? What do you think it's missing right now? Let's pretend that it's a blogging app and all we have are, whoops, I should start my app.
Some form or something to actually create the list?
Okay, let's add a form. Cool. So, where should that be? Should it be like a get for create? When you get create, you see the form? Let's do that. So that doesn't take any arguments. And I think that's just going to render some lucid. And we'll call that blogs form. Oh wait, that doesn't need that. Okay, so blogs form. Okay, so we're gonna tell the user to add a blog post, and then we're gonna have a form, and it's gonna have method post action. Oh, whoops. Action. Do you need to specify an action if it's just going to the same place? I'm just going to do it like that. And it's going to have some labels like title. And that's going to have an input. Name. And a body. Oh, this should be a text area, huh? I keep on wanting to write HTML. Okay, and then we need a input type submit. Let's see how badly I messed this up. Okay. Huh. Okay, so we've got some errors. Couldn't match type attribute with car. Oh, okay. So here, since I'm adding. So this is. Does anybody have any ideas what this error means?
An attribute must be it has a different escaping sequence from other kinds of strings, so it cannot just be a string.
Well, I mean, I think that's true. But what it's complaining about? So we can see that this is the problem is with the label function, which I didn't intend to have any attributes, right? So I've done something wrong that it thinks that title is supposed to be the attribute of label.
How do you specify the internal value of the tag?
I'm sorry?
So So if you don't want it to be the attributes, you want it to be like the value of the, so how do you do that?
So what GHC thinks I'm doing is I'm saying that label takes two arguments. It takes this argument and this argument, right? And it's like, well, the second argument is supposed to be attributes. So what I need to do instead is to make them both, use the do notation to make them both children of the label element. So there we go, that's better. And what was the other issue I ran into? Same one. Okay, here we go.
Looks like label requires explicitly list of attributes to be passed.
It does?
The first couldn't much type something with list of attributes.
Right, but this is a problem with text area, not label. So it could be the text area. I'm just going to change it to an input and figure this out later. It could be that I'm just using text area wrong, and I just don't know how text area works, because I don't usually code this way. So, cool. So this beautiful form now. And will this just work? I'm not sure. Okay. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, so let's find out why not. Persist logs. Okay. So it did make a post request to create. And my params were, oh wait, it did /create. Okay. See, you still get, like, everybody says that if you write Haskell, you don't get bugs. You still get bugs. It's very easy to write bugs. Whoops, oh, I didn't restart it, or reload. Okay, there we go. Yay, there we go. So now we should see that we can add a new blog post. So here's what that looked like again. Does anybody have any questions about how that worked? Or why it worked?
What kind of question? Like, it seems just an HTML element.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's very basic.
Is there a way to translate something like a data structure into a form, or is it something that is left to implement on the customer?
So the program that I usually use is called Digestive Functors, which is a very intimidating name. But it's basically just, the original library was called Formlets, which I thought was a much cuter name than Digestive Functors, but sadly that name didn't win. And, oops, that is the wrong link. Okay, I guess I know I need to update this. Okay, so digestive functors is really neat. There's some, I'm going to try to find some documentation for you. So there's a tutorial. Okay, so like, let's say you have a user type. You can make a form that takes text fields and returns a user. And the way that you do that is you kind of build up your user type with these form names, and these are actually like validations. So you can even say like, hey, I said you needed to specify an email, but you didn't give me an email. Or you can specify like more complex or custom validations.
I need to stop this if I can.
Uh-huh.
Can you actually put IO in this validation? Like, I want to check if the email is available, for example?
You definitely can. I can't remember how to do it. I think usually what I do is I do that in a second step. So the validations on the actual form fields are pure. But I mean, that's just because I don't want to mess with that. I think it's possible. And then later, what I'll do is I'll do all these side effecting validations, and then you can actually take the errors that this library gives you and add your own errors, and then those are what I render to the user. So yeah, it's a really neat library. I think there's a Lucid integration with it, and there's also a Heist integration with it. That, I don't know, yeah, if you're doing any kind of complex forms, you obviously don't want to do all this stuff manually every time. So, but you know, for a regular form, what you can do is, so let's say that we wanted to do some very basic validation here. We could just say like, if title is equal to nothing and body is equal to nothing, then error HTML. Ooh, whoops, that's wrong. Not valid or something like that. And then only otherwise do everything else. So that's like just a way you can do it while you're still figuring out. Digestive functors can get kind of complex and confusing. So, okay. Anything else what's the next thing that we should add or that people want to look at? I just realized we never looked at the model, the model module. So maybe we can look at that. Okay. So this is using a library called Postgres Simple to connect to Postgres. And I chose that one because it is very simple. You just write SQL, so it doesn't have any fancy DSL for creating queries. There are libraries like that, but they tend to get pretty complex and have very strange types and things like that. So here's our blog type, which is very simple. We tell, and just like always, we have type classes that are telling the library, letting the library know how to use our type. So we specify a to-row to tell PostgreSQL how to turn our data type into a row type, like something that they can insert into the database. And we have a from row type to say, here's how you take something from the database and turn it into our type. And the way that you create what a row is for PostgreSQL is a list of fields, and it provides a toField function that has instances for lots of common primitive types. So usually you can just say toField, toField, toField on your fields, and that'll turn it into something that can be inserted. If you had like something, if you created like a common thing that you want to do, because like what you could do is you could say like, let's say that you got a title and a body from the thing, and then you just like made a mistake and did this, right? There's no type is going to tell you that that's wrong because they're both text, right? So a common thing that people will do is make a little type for each field. Or maybe just for like the important fields that are most likely to get mixed up, like IDs or something like that. Now, if you and then you'd say like new type title. Now, if you did this, it would be wrong. It would say, hey, you put a body where the title should be and a title where the body should be, assuming that. Yeah. So this would now be caught by the compiler. So if you do this, then toField isn't going to work because it doesn't know how to turn a title into a field. Can anybody guess how we would fix that? Instance of a type class, yeah. So you make it an instance of the toField type class. Or, yeah, I think it's just called toField, which you can find all the instructions for how to do that in here. So you have like from field, from row, toField, to-row. Oops, that's not what I meant.
You can implement them separately. So if I have a field that is only for reads, I can only do a from field if I want.
Yeah, definitely. This is, I'm probably going to show you how to do that in a sec. So yeah, like it's got two fields for all of these. So any like regular Haskell type you're probably going to be fine with. Yeah, so there's the types, and then here's what the queries look like. This maybe looks a little bit different. I mean, this is probably like, I tried to keep the code in this example project very, very simple, and this is kind of weird, but so we have this function with resource, and this is from the data.pool library, which gives you a pool of some resource. And that just makes sure that like you don't just leave resources hanging around taking up resources. It will like open up the resource and then close it for you. So we say that we're going to use this resource from our context, the database, and we're going to supply a function. This is using Lambda syntax, if you're not familiar with it, to make an anonymous function from a connection to the result of a query. Okay.
I'm not sure how they're called in Haskell, but I would say type descriptions. Can they be inferred?
Right. So this is like this. In this case, it can't be inferred. I think it's because PostgreSQL is doing some like kind of type magic behind the scenes. A lot of times the fancier language extensions kind of lose some ability to infer types. So they'll like give you some conveniences like being able to magically turn a SQL row into the right type, but you have to tell it explicitly what the right type is. I agree, it does seem like it should know that the result of this is an IO block, because I say it right here. But somehow that gets lost in the translation. So query takes a connection to the database, a query, and again, this is just like the HTML type. This is actually of type query, and just you're just allowed to specify it as a string, and it returns something of the type that you give it.
So, what kind of, can you show us maybe an error that comes out if you remove that?
If I remove this, sure.
Yeah, just if you remove the explicit. Because I can imagine people installing this and then they're spending 3 days on this and getting stuck.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I think in this case, this is something that I was able to Google when I ran into it. So PostgreSQL is very commonly used. So you actually can find a lot of information on it. Oh, it does work. Cool. So maybe I'm thinking, maybe I'm used. Yeah, that's probably why. There's another library that's like even a little bit has a harder time with these called Opali, which if you're interested in something that has like a DSL for querying, Opali is really cool, but it uses a lot of language extensions and can be it's probably like more of an intermediate library to use. Yeah. So then for inserts, you can use the little question mark thing to insert. You can probably guess that you don't want to say like blog title, and why don't you want to do that? SQL injection. Yeah. So instead you use the question marks, and then you can give it your parameters, and it'll insert that into the database. And then here I'm just saying, like, I expect that this changes one, that the result of this should change. What this returns is the number of rows that were altered. So I'm saying that that should equal 1 because I want one row to be inserted, and that tells me if it succeeded. You could also have it. You could also change this to like be like returning the title and body, in which case it would return the actual blog. There's a lot of stuff that you could do. Cool. So you mentioned wanting to see what it would be like if you have two types, like one for like new things and one for old things.
I'm more interested in reading and writing.
Reading and writing.
I don't use this concept where I save and load the same thing anymore.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I just wanted to know if you needed to implement both or not. That's all.
Okay. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's make a new schema, and I'm really sorry that there's not a fancier way of doing this besides just like making a file and naming it yourself. Like I usually end up making like a little helper script, but I haven't like open sourced any of them yet. So I'm going to add created at to my blogs. And of course, I don't remember SQL on the spot like this. Okay. So that's I'm gonna actually make that a separate definition. Okay. So I'm gonna add column created at, what is it, time zone TZ? I'm gonna copy off of Smooch. Timestamps TZ. Does anybody know SQL? Does that look great? Okay.
Do you need a semicolon at the end, or?
No, I don't really need one. I should probably just take out both of them. It doesn't seem to matter. I've definitely done both, and it just works. Okay. So I wouldn't have to like do this next step if we had the auto importer set up, but I'll have to add the module. And now, since both of these have the same name, I'm going to have to qualify the import. Oh, whoop.
Yeah, you need to remove the explicit migrate.
Sorry?
You're importing as qualified.
Oh,
Migrate also.
right.
Can you actually reference symbols statically? Like, you have them in strings down there.
Down here?
Yeah, you have. Yeah, is there a way to reference a type in here in some way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is just the name of the migration.
Yeah.
So I think it could be anything.
Okay, so it's just a reference for this migration.
Yeah. And if I was using auto importer, it just like kind of does it automatically. So that's why I'm just making the same output that the auto importer would have made.
So this is just like label, right? It can be any string that doesn't reference anything.
Yeah. Oh,
It
whoops.
could be imported the same symbol twice, by the way.
Okay. You mean I imported the same?
Yeah, the imports, those
Up
are
here?
initial schema twice.
Oh, you're right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Since I didn't load this executable into GHC, I loaded the other one. I'm going to just build it in my terminal. Oh, and it is a little bit of a pain that you have to like compile to get your migrations, but okay, cool. So now we have created at, and if we don't change anything, then it'll add the row and since I have a default, it'll just be fine. I mean, let me make sure that that's true, but I think that's the case. So this is like with created at. Okay, so it still works even though I haven't changed anything, just because the new field has a default value. So if we want to be able to add that to our type here, we can do that. And we'll add a to field for that. And we'll add.
You just wrote created, not created at.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, because this. I mean, yeah. These are just names for whatever's there. It just happens that they're the same as the original.
In the initial stages of development where things tend to change a lot, it seems kind of a lot of boilerplate to modify these instances. Are there derivable?
Yeah, I think so. I think there probably are. There's probably like a generic, a way to do like.
Derive functor or something like this. So
Yes.
derive to row or from.
Yeah, I mean, especially this one. Like, I mean, probably all of these seem like they could be automatable, right? So, yeah, there's probably like a generic version. So, yeah, so this is now like a valid type. Now if we like do, I would love to have something that would automatically add my imports, especially since I can never remember where UTC time is from. Data time clock. That's almost there. Cool, so now we got some errors because we don't have all the types that, or all the fields that we need. And this is an example of how like the compiler kind of tells you everything that needs to be changed whenever you make a change. Oh, whoops. Oh, okay, so here, this is interesting. So we added this field, and now when we're creating a blog, we have to provide it with the time it was created. Like, is the user going to type in the date whenever they are like filling out their little like tweet or whatever? That seems very silly. So what I usually do is have two types. You have your regular type, which is kind of the type that is read from the database usually. And then you can have a separate type that is the type that is put into the database. And it doesn't have any fields that are not required by the insert functions.
So this would only have the two rows.
Yeah. And then the other one would probably have the from row. And you'd also need a to row on the read on this type with all the fields, just because like if you edit it, you need to have all the fields, but you don't need to do that right now. So new blog doesn't need these anymore, and blog does. Oh, wait, okay, so these are the same, so this is where you run into the record problem, which there are extensions to help with that now, but new blog, yeah. Cool, so now we're getting, okay, so now whenever we're doing our insert, we're going to take a new blog.
Name the record new topic instead of new body.
Huh?
Did you feel this name correctly on new?
The new blog record. Record.
Okay.
Toddy. Oh. Okay. Cool. No. Cool. So now we can call this new blog instead of blog. And now everything compiles. And I think we'll even be able to, okay, so that, yay, it works. Now let's go back to the blogs page and see our blogs. Oh no, something went wrong. So this is where it's handy to have a type-safe querying DSL, because our model here, our query here, has only 2 fields that it's querying for, but our type needs 3. And Postgres Simple doesn't know anything about that because this is just a string. So it waits until it hits the SQL, gets the SQL value back, and then it's like, oh no, everything's wrong. So these are the kinds of errors that you see a lot as you're developing because of this lack of types to guide you.
Is there a way to, assuming you have a running Postgres instance at compile time, is there a way to make this match somehow?
I think,
back to the questionnaire, basically. You want to infer things from the
right. I think there might be a library that does that, but I don't know what it would be.
So I'm a Scala programmer, I guess, admit. So in Scala we have either libraries that build SQL programmatically, Python, DSL exposed by a library, not strings, so it isn't compile check. So that's one way. And the other is we have a macro system that just runs the compilation. There are libraries that can, just run something like template Haskell, I guess. That just during macro expansion, they just go to database and check your strings. So I see it as there are 2 ways of doing it in a type-safe way. One is through some kind of a compiler plugin, like macro or something like this, if you stay with strings, or just construct your SQL strings or structures programmatically. Then, well, obviously some error will be caught by
It's just that SQL is a very fine language.
right, true. So these are trade-offs basically. Oh, maybe there's other way, but I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. So this is what Opali looks like, which is one type-safe querying language. It's a little bit hairy. There's a lot of like, this is like from the language extension arrows. So it uses arrows.
That's the trade-off I was talking about, right? Because
Yeah.
you need to learn a new language, so to say.
Right.
Just to generate an SQL, which is yet another language, and so on and so on. So this is kind of a bagel tower.
Yeah. And another one is persistent, which also has, I think this is a little bit nicer. Opali is nice because it doesn't have the template Haskell as much. I just don't particularly like template Haskell. And another one is Esquelito, which I think also is pretty nice. Also template Haskell, but So yeah, so we're wrapping up. Is there any like other things that people are curious about at this point?
What are your kind of like blockers when using the real world? Where do you mostly stumble upon? Where do you say the most problems come from like this?
I mean, my biggest problems are like distributed systems problems, like making sure that I send exactly one email, stuff like that, which isn't really a Haskell problem. I would say it's more, there's a lot of boilerplate, a lot of things need to change if one thing changes. I really wouldn't encourage, I think Postgres Simple has a lot of drawbacks in terms of like being able to change things, because if I make a change to blogs, I have to go through all these strings to find the blogs. It's also hard to get information about testing web applications, in my experience, because a lot of people fall back on the like, oh, we have types, we don't need tests. But I mean, especially if you are having queries like this, you want to make sure that every query always works. So you end up having a lot of tests, and making those manageable is like a big with. I don't know, I could go, I could probably think of a bunch more. Yeah. But thanks, everybody. Just one more thing. If you want to see a little bit more of a real world app, it's not quite in production, because as soon as I realized it might have users if I put it into production, it became a lot less fun. But this has like more database stuff. It has like sessions, authentication, stuff like that. So it's my username /smooch. So anyway, thanks everybody for coming.